Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, NFL season is back. We are officially less than 3 days away from the kickoff of the season with the Thursday night game, and less than 6 days away from what I consider the real kickoff of the season, when I get to sit on my couch and watch NFL Red Zone and hear Scott Hansen tell me that 7 hours of commercial-free football starts now. Yes, I can almost feel it. I am ecstatic that NFL season is back. If you are normally used to our college football content, welcome. Glad to have you here for the NFL content. If you are just here for the NFL content, I advise you to subscribe to the channel. That way you can go ahead and check out the rest of our college football and golf content for the rest of the fall. But basically, when we do NFL content here, a lot of fantasy analysts have their, love, hate, like, dislike, whatever they want to call it. Here at Mike's Money Picks, we do buy or sell. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight some players at each position that we like this week that are on our buy list, and players that we don't like at each position that are on our sell list. If a guy makes his way onto the buy list, that means we like him in fantasy, DFS. Bet the overs on his player props. If the guy's on the sell list, then we don't like him in fantasy, send him to the bench. Don't start him in DFS, and take the unders on the player props. So whether you are somebody who indulges in fantasy like me, DFS like me, or player props like me, you can get a little bit of something for everybody here. But we're going to go ahead and dive into the action with the first quarterback buy of the 2024 season. All right, so the first quarterback buy of the 2024 season is going to be one who is playing in the first game of the 2024 season. That is Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs, and we're going to be looking at the player cards and game logs on DraftKings, just because I find it to be in a great format where you get a lot of information, and it's done in a very visually pleasing way. So Patrick Mahomes is getting a matchup against Baltimore that he has historically eaten up. In the AFC Championship game last season, that 17-10 slugfest where the Chiefs were in the lead the whole way, he only put up 15 fantasy points. But in his 4 regular season matchups against Baltimore that he's played in his career, he has utterly dominated the Ravens. He's thrown for 300 yards or more in all 4 of those matchups. He is averaging 28 fantasy points against the Ravens in his career, and that includes the postseason game. And oh, by the way, he's playing at home. It's ring night. They had the embarrassment of losing on opening night last year. So you know that they're going to come out. They're going to be motivated. They're going to want to score some points. And he's also got a new toy to play with in rookie Xavier Worthy, who I am very high on throughout the course of the season. So I just think that this is a prime opportunity for Mahomes in a matchup that he's very comfortable with, in a situation where he's going to be highly motivated to put up a lot of fantasy points. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks this week. If you drafted him in season-long fantasy, don't get cute. Play Patrick Mahomes this week against Baltimore. Do not be afraid of that Baltimore Ravens matchup. The second quarterback on my buy list is going to be Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. So Daniels, to me, has a great game environment for a really good fantasy day. I couldn't think of the best word to use there. He has a great game environment for a really good fantasy performance. And he also, just really the way he's going to put up fantasy points, I think is going to be really key as well. So Jaden Daniels is going to be taking on Tampa Bay, who allowed the 5th most passing yards in the NFL throughout all of the 2023 season. And Tampa also played at a fast tempo last year. They were above average in both pass rate and neutral tempo. So this is a team that is going to get off a lot of plays, right? More plays is going to equal more opportunities to score fantasy points. And Washington this season overhauled their coaching staff. They got a new offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. You might be familiar with him. He is going to be calling the plays in Washington. He's a guy who's going to have this team operating at a high tempo. They're going to be running the air raid. Jaden Daniels is a quarterback who can run with his legs. And really, these two teams don't really have much of a run game to speak of, either of them. So I really think this is going to be a game of just two offenses throwing it all over the yard back and forth. Plenty of pass attempts to go around on both sides. Plenty of points to go around on both sides. And I think Daniels is going to be a big beneficiary for Washington. And if you're playing DFS, you know that you always want to stack your quarterbacks. And one thing with Daniels, I think he has one very, very clear stacking partner in Terry McLaurin. Who the rest of the receiving core is going to be in the starting lineup, we don't really know. So you might want to just, if you're looking to play it safe, you can just play it safe with a stack with Terry McLaurin. But if you want to try out a Luke McCaffrey or a Diami Brown or a Zach Ertz at tight end, Ben Sinnott at tight end, you can. But we know that Daniels to McLaurin is going to be a big connection. And then if you're looking to play DFS and you're looking to stack this game, the other side has very clear stacking components as well. You've got Rachaad White out of the backfield for Tampa. You've got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, a very narrow target tree for that Tampa team, very narrow target tree for this Washington team. So I think that this is a very clear game stacking opportunity if you're looking to stack it up in DFS. If you're playing season-long fantasy, you drafted Jaden Daniels, get him in your starting lineup this week. Now, next up, we always do a weekly category if you're desperate, where if you need somebody off the waiver wire or you're looking for somebody really cheap in DFS, somebody that you can go to who's not going to cost you a whole lot of coin. And this week, I think that is going to be Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings. Look, last year, Kevin O'Connell and this Vikings offense was pretty much a solid option no matter who was at quarterback to just play the Vikings quarterback week in and week out. And now it's going to be Sam Darnold, who, when he was with Carolina, showed a very high weekly ceiling. He had some really good games. Now, he wasn't good overall, or else he would still be there, but he had some good games, good enough performances that he was worth starting some weeks in Carolina, and I think that it's going to be the case this week in Minnesota. The Giants secondary is really banged up, and I think that this is going to be an opportunity where Darnold, with this Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay type scheme, is just going to come in and just sling it all over the yard and hope that it finds his teammates more often than it doesn't. And I think that if you're really in need of a starter this week in fantasy, Sam Darnold will be somebody that you could go with. Now, for the sell list at the quarterback position, look, it's week one. The matchups, we know a little bit of what they did last year. We don't really know exactly what they're going to look like this year. We know who's starting, who's not starting, like who's won the starting jobs, right? So it's really tricky to find guys to put on the sell list in week one. But I do have one at the quarterback position. It's going to be Dak Prescott. Look, if you drafted him to be your starter in season-long fantasy, I think that was a good move. I like Dak over the course of this 2024 NFL season, but I don't like this matchup going into Cleveland. Last year, the Cleveland Browns at home were the best defensive unit in the league. They only allowed 13 points per game at home. And look, if Dallas is only going to score 13 points, then Dak Prescott isn't going to have a great fantasy day, right? So I really don't like the prospects of this. And really, you look at last season, when Dallas played good defensive teams, they kind of ran the ball a little bit more and just kind of leaned on that run game and kept the game low scoring. I could kind of see them doing the same thing here in this matchup against Cleveland. So I just don't really like it for Dak. Like I said, I like him for the whole season, but I don't like this matchup heading into Cleveland. I just don't think it's a great spot for him. All right, let's take a quick breather, and then we're going to break down the running backs. All right, now at the running back position, it's a little bit like the quarterback position in week one, where I got a lot of nominees for the buy list, not a lot for the sell list. So let's go ahead and break it down. The first guy that's going to be on the buy list for me this week is Isaiah Pacheco I messed that up. The first guy that's going to be on the buy list for me this week is going to be James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. Sorry, I was reading the wrong part of my notes. More on Pacheco later. So James Conner is going to be the first running back on the buy list for me this week. And look, James Conner, I had ranked as my 15th running back for season long because pretty much when he's healthy, he's an RB1 in fantasy. And the problem with him is that he generally plays between 13 and 15 games a year. So those 2 games that you don't have him, it kind of hurts. But when he's healthy, he's a running back 1. He's been that way for pretty much the last 3 or 4 years, right? You look at how he ended the season last year. And I think that's super important to look at the end of the season last year, because that was when the Cardinals kind of got the whole gang back together, right? They had Kyler back healthy. They had Connor back healthy. They were starting McBride at tight end. They were starting to build for the future and what they were going to do in 2024, right? And in those last 5 games, James Conner ended the season with 5 straight games over 17 PPR fantasy points. 2 of those were over 25 fantasy points in standard leagues. 3 of them were over 25 fantasy points in DraftKings scoring. So this is a guy who can put up fantasy points in bunches. And really, you look at what the Cardinals did in the offseason. The one thing that you would probably worry about for James Conner is, would his pass catching role be in danger, right? Because he was used as a pass catcher in the last half of last season. Well, they did not add any real pass catching competition. They drafted Trey Benson, who's kind of a similar player to Conner. And they pretty much said that this year is going to be a, quote, redshirt year for Trey Benson. So really, with there not being a whole lot of competition for Conner's workload, as long as Conner is healthy, he's going to be a top 10 back. And this matchup against Buffalo, I do not think is a bad one. They can be run on and they can give up passes to the back out of the backfield. So I think James Conner is in a great spot this week. Now, speaking of guys who have great matchups, Kenneth Walker III, to me, has a prime matchup this week. He is going up against the Denver Broncos, who ranked 31st against running backs last year. But Kenneth Walker also has a lot of other positive attributes about him that made me like him this week. So really, Kenneth Walker is a guy that has not been used as a pass catcher through 2 years in his NFL career. That one way that he could progress from being a solid RB2 option to an RB1 option week in, week out in fantasy is if he adds pass catching, right? Or if he just gets better at running the football. But obviously, it'd be easier to just say, hey, why don't you just catch 3 or 4 passes a week? So Walker has been getting rave reviews in camp about how he's looked, how he's performed, how his pass catching skills have been. And the new Seahawks offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, was from Washington last year, who utilized Dylan Johnson as a 3-down back, traditionally not previously a pass catching back. So I think that all the usage is trending in the right direction for Kenneth Walker to be a 3-down back for the Seattle Seahawks this year. And also, if he's going to get to be a 3-down back, this is a great team to be a 3-down back against because Denver gives up a ton of fantasy points to runners. Now, one of the most intriguing players in all of fantasy is Devon Achane. We've talked about him time in, time out. Look, I think that when he is active, if you drafted him in fantasy, you have to play him because you never know when he is going to pop off. He does not need a lot of carries. He does not need a lot of opportunities to just pop off and break off a few big plays. So if you have him, you better start him. And really, as long as he's healthy, he is a guy that needs to be in your lineup. But if you're playing DFS, I would caution you with Achane. To me, he is what I would consider a GPP or a tournament play as opposed to a cash game play. He is a guy that can absolutely hit a high ceiling, but also show a really low floor because the consistent volume is just not there. You need him to break off long runs on low volume if he's going to hit. So I would just have a little bit of a word of caution with that with Achane. And I think he's a total prop stay away from me. Maybe if you want to get like a longest rush for him, I think that would be something that you could do. But I just think that he's a very high risk, high reward profile. But if you drafted him in season long, you better keep him in your lineup as long as he's active or until otherwise noted. Now, if you're desperate this week at the running back position, look, there's a lot of guys that we perceive to be in committees that are like either not going to be in a committee this week or there's a chance that they're not going to be in a committee this week. Like in Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren is currently questionable. If Jaylen Warren is out, Najee Harris is an absolute one heck of a play if Jaylen Warren is out. Zach Charbonnet, we talked about Kenneth Walker III. Zach Charbonnet might miss that. That might make Kenneth Walker an even better play than he is on paper. And then if you're really desperate in season-long fantasy, you got 2 guys this week who are going to be getting starts that were not drafted as starters. And that's Jerome Ford of Cleveland and Chuba Hubbard of Carolina, with Nick Chubb and Jonathan Brooks respectively being out injured for the first part of the season. Ford and Hubbard are going to be asked to take on more of a workload. I think that they're pretty solid high floor plays in DFS. I think that they are guys that if you need to throw somebody out there in season-long fantasy, I think they are 2 guys that you can absolutely do that with. Now, for the sell list at the running back position, I said I was going to get back to this guy later. I got to do it now. It's Isaiah Pacheco. So I was all over Pacheco in the preseason. I thought that everything lined up for him to have a huge season. But now I am seriously concerned. What has happened in between now and then? The Chiefs signed Samaje Perine. Why is that relevant? Samaje Perine led all backs in the NFL last season in yards per route run, aka he is very effective as a pass catcher out of the backfield. That hurts Isaiah Pacheco if Perine actually ends up getting usage. It just does, because Pacheco, you look at his success in the playoffs last year, the last 2 games against Baltimore and San Francisco, he got targeted 10 times, caught 10 passes. So this is a guy that really, and throughout the middle of last season, he caught a lot of passes as well. A lot of his fantasy success was tied to that being used as a passing down back when Jerick McKinnon was hurt. And now that Perine is a part of the equation, if Pacheco loses that passing game role, there's going to go a lot of his production with it. So I am really interested to see how this plays out for Pacheco and Perine in game 1 to know where we can rank and where we can see, or what we can see for Pacheco and Perine going forward. All right, let's take a quick breather, and then we're going to talk about the wide receiver. Now, I do want to mention before we move on to the wide receivers, there are a few places where you can get more information from me. First off, I'm more than happy to answer any start-sit question, DFS question, fantasy question in general on Twitter. If you reach out to me at Mike's Money Picks, you can also follow me on there because I will tweet out show updates as well. So just follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on audio. Fantasy Corner Discord is a great place to be. It's entirely free. I've gotten questions about that. And it's got a lot of smart people. It's got a really DFS tilt. So really, if you're looking to play NFL DFS, looking to talk NFL DFS with people, then the Fantasy Corner Discord will be a place to get in on. We also do all the other sports as well. MLB, NBA, college football has really been popping recently. So just check that out if you're interested. And then also, if you play DFS, I do post a weekly core for both DraftKings and FanDuel on my Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. So check that out if you are interested in that as well. And then if you're looking to try something new this season, it's week 1. Try something new. We're partnered with Sign Up Expert. So head on over to signupexpert.com/MikesPicks. What they do is they give you the best offers and promo codes for new users on any DFS player prop or sportsbook site. And it's even synced to your locations. It'll only show you what is legal in your state or province. So if you're looking to sign up for a new site, go check out those promo codes before you do anything else. All right, so now let's resume with our talk about the receivers. So wide receiver. There is one guy that stands above all else as my top option at the wide receiver position this week, and that is going to be Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. So to me, it's a combination of matchup, usage, situation, right? So first off, everybody thinks that Jefferson is going to just have this big downturn because Kirk Cousins isn't there. Now it's Sam Darnold throwing passes. Oh, Darnold can't throw to Jefferson, blah, blah, blah. I'm not concerned. You look at Jefferson at the end of last season. When Jefferson got back from his injury, he averaged 22 fantasy points per game in the games without Kirk Cousins last season. In fact, in every game that Justin Jefferson started and finished last year, he had 9 targets or more in every single game. This is a guy that is going to get fed the football pretty much no matter who the quarterback is. And really, it's going to be even more so this week because the Minnesota Vikings are probably going to be without Jordan Addison, their wide receiver 2. They're certainly going to be without TJ Hawkinson, their superstar tight end. And so that leaves an unproven receiving core of Jalen Naylor and Brandon Powell alongside Jefferson. And if I'm Sam Darnold, if I'm playing to try to keep my NFL career alive, I'm going to be throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson other than those other 2 guys. No disrespect to them, but I'm going to be throwing the ball to Jefferson. And so I think Jefferson is just going to get fed with targets. And oh, by the way, the New York Giants have a lot of injuries in their secondary. So I think this is just a great spot for Jefferson to just go out and eat. Now, honorable mention, Jefferson is my number 1 receiver this week. I would personally have Amon-Ra St. Brown as number 2. Look, he's just an absolute volume machine in terms of the targets he gets. But really, what he did against the Rams last time is why I really like him this time. You know, he was only targeted 9 times, which for Amon-Ra is quite low. But he caught 7 of them for 110 yards in that game. That's 18 fantasy points standard. Did not score a touchdown. Look, he's going to get a ton of opportunities to score fantasy points. I think Amon-Ra is another guy that I'm super high on this week. Now, the second receiver that is on the buy list officially is going to be Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. So first off, weird thing about Olave, he tends to do a lot of his damage at the start of the season. It's been both ways, or both seasons so far in his NFL career. He's been better at the start of the season than at the end, which is a weird trend, but we'll see if it continues. Anyway, the New Orleans Saints have a new offensive coordinator, and it is one of the Kyle Shanahan tree, which, side note, more of the NFL offenses are going towards either a Kyle Shanahan tree coach or a Sean McVay tree coach, which is super, super relevant. Both of those coaching trees, they kind of originate in the same place, but both of them are offenses that are predicated on short passing to playmakers where they can get the ball in space and break tackles, and then you get short, and then eventually there's a deep crossing route or a deep post or something like that where it springs them deep, right? You see it happen all the time with like the Miami offense, the San Fran offense, the Rams offense, right? And they're so good at getting their playmakers the football. It's so good for fantasy because it allows you to pinpoint the superstar players on that team and know that they're going to get fed with targets. They're going to get plenty of opportunities, right? Well, now Chris Olave has one of those offenses. You know, he's going from what was like an early 2000s NFL offense with the Saints' old offensive coordinator to now this modern Shanahan McVay tree offense where he's going to have a lot of opportunities to get the football. And I think that's going to be great for him in fantasy. And the matchup against Carolina is very good. I think the Panthers are going to be better than people expect this year, mostly because people just expect 0 wins. And I'm also an optimistic Panthers fan. But I think that this sets up so that this game is going to go back and forth. These teams are going to play at a faster tempo than people expect. But Olave has historically done a lot of damage against the Carolina Panthers. In his 4 games against the Panthers in his career, he's averaging 17 PPR points per game. He's had double-digit targets in 3 of those 4 games. That's pretty staggering. And I think that he's in a better situation now than he ever was in any of those games. So Chris Olave on the bye list this week. If you're desperate at the wide receiver position, there's a few guys who are going to be playing increased roles because of injuries around them, right? We already mentioned the Lions guys, or I'm sorry, not the Lions guys, the Vikings guys, excuse me. But there's a few more. So Rondale Moore was injured for the Atlanta Falcons, and now Ray McCloud is going to step into the starting slot role. Kirk Cousins loves to target his slot receiver, so I think Ray McCloud is worth a look if you're like super desperate in season long, or if you're playing DFS and you need a bargain bin value play. I think he's worth a click. And then for the Arizona Cardinals, Zay Jones is going to be out. Greg Dortch is going to be starting for them in the slot. Michael Wilson is going to be starting for them out wide. I think that both of those guys are worth looks in both season long and DFS. And then last guy I want to mention here on his own is Andre Ishibis, I believe is how his name is pronounced. He is going to be stepping into the wide receiver 3 role for the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a role that tends to just have these random pop-off games, right? Like you think about Tyler Boyd over the last 5 years. There's just random games where he just pops off and has 20 fantasy points out of nowhere, right? And so Ishibis is going to be the guy in that role. He's going to have a chance to have a big game as long as he continues to be the starter in that offense. And then lastly, Odell Beckham Jr. is out for the Dolphins. And so that is going to lead to a big-time increased role for either Braxton Berrios or Malik Washington, the rookie coming out of Virginia. I think both of those names are ones that you need to look out for. If you're playing DFS, again, those are some deep value plays. If you're playing season-long fantasy, you probably don't need to worry about those two guys, but it wouldn't shock me if they showed up on the waiver wire if they have a good game in week 1. Now, for the sell list at the wide receiver position, I've only got one. It's going to be Devontae Adams. So, look, Adams to me, like, I don't think he's a bad fantasy option just because of the guaranteed volume that he's going to get. I think that Minshew is an upgraded quarterback from what we were expecting. But he's got a very narrow path to fantasy dominance, and it is dependent on volume, right? He's got to get a ton of targets. Well, in this game against the Chargers, how is he going to get a ton of targets? I don't see it, because this game not only has the lowest point total according to Las Vegas the entire weekend, 40.5, but the Chargers are going to be a team that is going to play slow and run the ball with Jim Harbaugh as head coach. The Vegas Raiders are going to be a team that plays slow and runs the ball with Antonio Pierce as head coach. And oh, by the way, Devontae Adams has got some sort of tweak apparently that has caused him to miss the second half of the preseason. I obviously think he's going to play this game, but like, he's 32 years old. He ain't getting any younger. These tweaks are not what we want to see, right? So I just don't think he's going to have a boatload of opportunities in this game with just the expected game flow. I don't like the tweak that they're talking about. I just think this is not a good spot for Adams, and I'm definitely in wait and see mode in terms of what he's going to do here in week 1. All right, now, lastly, the tight end position. I do have one nominee for the buy list this week, because let's be honest, if you're playing season-long fantasy, you drafted your starting tight end, you're rolling them out in week 1. You don't need to overthink this. The guy that I like this week is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. So basically, this one boils down to his quarterback. Jacoby Brissett is going to be starting the season for the New England Patriots, and historically, he targets tight ends at a high rate. Throughout all of his stops, Jacoby Brissett targets tight ends. And so now that is Hunter Henry, who, oh, by the way, ended the season pretty strong last year. 19 fantasy points in back-to-back games to end the season. So I think this is a pretty good spot for Henry, with knowing that he should see a boosted target share with Jacoby Brissett. Also knowing that New England Patriots do not really have a whole lot of proven commodities at the wide receiver position. He should get plenty of targets in this one, and hopefully he falls into the end zone, gets you a touchdown, and ends up with a lot of fantasy points. All right, but that is going to do it for the 2024 week 1 buy or sell list for the NFL season. If this video helped you out in any way on YouTube, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. Again, it helps me out a ton. I cannot stress enough my gratitude for when you guys do that. I really do appreciate it so much. And then while you're at it, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the audio feed. That way you can be with us for the rest of the NFL season. We will be doing these buy or sells weekly. We will also have our weekly college football and golf content as well. But we're going to go ahead and close up shop for week 1, guys. Like I said, I can't wait for week 1. I love NFL season. I love watching the NFL mostly because of NFL Red Zone. My team, the Panthers, we suck. So I am a red zone guy. I turn on red zone at 1 p.m. I do not turn it off until there is the music at the end telling me that I need to turn it off. And it's just so great to follow for fantasy. It's like just the most like mentally stimulating, no commercials. It's great. And I'm so looking forward to being, tracking all the fantasy scores, all the DFS lineups, all that stuff. So really looking forward to week 1. Wish you guys the best of luck in your week 1 matchups and on your week 1 DFS lineups. Thank you guys for watching this episode. Hopefully I was able to help you out a little bit, and I will see you guys next time.